Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to look at Ben Jonson's contribution to the growth of English literary criticism. He lived somewhere around 1573 to 1637. So it is obvious that he was familiar with Shakespeare's works, or all the greats, all the university wits and Marlowe and everyone. He was basically familiar with all of the giants himself, and he himself was a poet, dramatist, and a literary critic. Literary critic last because it is more sporadic than of his other the other forms, other genres he was expert in. He wrote great poetry. He was a very good dramatist. As literary critic, his criticism is found. I mention found as in they were not critical works as such, except for maybe discoveries. These, but they are found in his other works. So, the Poetaster, Conversations with Drummond, and Timber, or it is popularly known as Discoveries or Discoveries Made Upon Men and Matters. Basically, discoveries is something that people often refer to when it comes to Ben Jonson. He advocated classicism with the exception of Shakespeare. You have to understand that Ben Jonson, though had great love for the native tradition, he was nevertheless was a classic at heart because he himself modeled his all his writings on the classic writers, even the criticism for that matter. He had read extensively on all the Greek and Roman writers, Italian writers, and he was familiar with Aristotle, he was familiar with Plato, he was familiar with Horace, Quintilian, all of those people. So he advocated classicism. He thought that classicism, the classic rules, the classical rules were the best, except for Shakespeare. Why has he made exception for Shakespeare? Because he thought Shakespeare was divinely gifted. Okay, so when someone is really gifted, they need not follow convention. Okay, their intuitive grasp of things itself is of an exemplary nature. Okay, they don't really have to hanker after rules made by other people. So he believed Shakespeare was a master himself. He did not need to subscribe to other people's rules, the classical rules. Whereas ordinary people, or any other poet for that matter, he believed, any dramatist for that matter, who believed? Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson believed that the other writers have to, follow the rules laid down by the great Greeks. Okay, so he believed this classicism was necessary for everyone to write properly, to write well. He wanted writers to write not by chance, but knowingly. Knowingly, as in, just because I feel like writing, I write. No, that is not the case. That is not how you should write. You may have certain command of the vocabulary, you may have a certain practice in rhyming and creating metrical compositions, or you may have certain imagination to help you with the plot, but that does not mean that you can simply go ahead and write without having certain ground rules. So what he believed that every writer should write not by chance as in just simply without really thinking much about it. They have to write knowingly. There's a difference, right? There are people who just talk without really thinking about the implications of the speech they have on others, that might have on others, right? But there are people who actually think before they speak and know how to speak, what to say, when to say, right? So you can apply that rule here, apply that analogy here, sorry. His plays were modeled on Latin drama, Latin dramatists more particularly. He followed Seneca in tragedy, Plotinus and Terence in comedy, Horace, Aristotle, and Seneca the elder, Quintilian, Pliny the younger, and Petronius. Oh, in criticism, I forgot to mention right type criticism here. He followed these people for his criticism. So he borrowed extensively, just like Sir Philip Sidney borrowed extensively from from all these people, especially Aristotle and Plato. Ben Jonson too borrowed quite a bit from all of these, Grecian and Italians. These were Italians. Quintilian, Pliny, and Petronius were all Italians. Okay. He was one of the first neoclassic critics in English. Neoclassic as in returning to classic. We had this neoclassical age in the 17th century, right? So he was the first critic, of neoclassic critic in English. He developed his theory and practice on the basis of the achievement of the great Greek and Latin writers. Okay. He modeled all of his theory and practice. We are not merely talking about theory here, we're talking about practice here, because as a dramatist, he wrote his plays based on, the achievement of the Greek and Latin writers. Here, the achievement would be the kind of response these writers had during their time or even after their time. So a certain work is, if it is still popular, I would want to model my work on that particular work, right? Because it is time tested. It has had great response in that age itself, and it is still popular, which means that the writer has done something right. The writer has written it well, right? And who tries to systematize classical practice and classical critical ideas into a set of rules for the guidance of modern writers. So first of all, he tried to develop his theory and practice on the basis of the achievement of the great Greek and Latin writers, and he tried to systematize classical practice. There were critics who made observations on how a certain drama was written in a certain period, right? It was not systematically done per se. It was observed after the incident, right? So the drama was first written, it came on stage, and after that observations were made upon it. So there was no systematized rule laid down before the drama came into being, right? That particular drama came into being, right? So here Ben Jonson looked at this is an observation made by David Eiches in his critical approaches to literature. He says how Ben Jonson systematized classical practice, okay, and classical critical ideas, and made them into rules. Yeah, he made them into rules for the guidance of modern writers. So it's as if, like, I make an observation from things around me, I look at them and lay down rules for someone else. So he laid down rules for other writers, the modern writers, to what to do and what not to do. So that was the main critical approach of Ben Jonson in a nutshell. So this particular slide is about his work, discoveries. We spoke about some three of his works, right? The Poetaster, Conversations with Drummond, or Timber, which is popularly known as Discoveries. Discoveries made upon men and matters. So this Discoveries was published 4 years after his death in 1641. Okay, so it is quite possible that he did not intend to publish it. It may have been just his own observations for his own personal use, like keeping a journal. So it is a collection of notes with a Latin heading. So each note had a Latin heading, and each note was varying in length. So it was of different lengths. So one note may be a mere sentence, just a sentence would be written under that heading. Or sometimes it would run into a miniature essay. It could be a small essay. So the main subjects that he dealt with, that he wrote about in these notes, for the lack of a better word, we call it notes. In these notes, they were mainly morality, politics, and literature. So literature was mainly connected to morality and politics in most of his notes. Now, few original ideas can be seen in his notes, but the rest are translations or adaptations. So mostly, as I said earlier, he borrowed extensively from all his Latin dramatists and critics, right? So he those notes contain quite a bit about Aristotle's viewpoint, not merely Aristotle's viewpoint on unity of time, on unity of structure, action, and all that. And there's a little bit about Plato, a little bit about Horace. We have just about all the critics he was familiar with in his discoveries. So, but there are a few original remarks as well. Original as in his own observations, his own ideas are there as well. But most of them are translations or adaptations. So overall, there are 137 sections, of which very few are his own. Now, looking into his classicism, as in his adherence for classical rules, he wanted to raise English to the excellence of Greek and Latin. He loved English, he had this great love for the English tradition, but he wanted to raise it to the Greek and Latin standards. Because so he set himself to cure the ills that beset English literature. I don't ask me who told this, but apparently he believed that he was capable of curing the all the things that ailed English literature, especially the the illness of excess. He believed that all the writers, English writers, had excessive passion, excessive imagination, and excessive expression. So they worked in hyperboles. So he thought that okay, Ben Jonson believed that yeah, the English writers had no control over themselves. Everything was either extremely passionate or imaginative, extremely imaginative, or the expressions bordered on hyperbole or incongruous. Yeah. He laid down why, or I mean, he believed that this, no, the main reason behind this excess was the ungoverned impulse. Okay, the ungoverned impulse in the English writers was a cause for all of these excesses. And how do you curb this impulse? Because see, impulse itself is a good thing, but being impulsive is not, right? You have to have certain control over your impulse, otherwise you would act foolishly detrimental to your own health, right? So this ungoverned impulse required some well tried law to curb it. Well tried law to curb it, as in he wanted to lay down the rules of Greek and Latin to the English to govern these, to curb the impulse here, right? Whatsoever nature at any time dictated to the most happy, or long exercise to the most laborious, that the wisdom and learning of Aristotle has brought into an art. So, whatever nature at any time has dictated to the most happy or long exercise to the most laborious, the wisdom and learning of Aristotle has brought it into art. As in Aristotle, he seems to be holding Aristotle at a very high pedestal here, putting him on a pedestal, saying that he was capable of putting everything that nature dictated to a happy or a laborious person. The wisdom and learning of Aristotle has brought to the art, because he understood the causes of things, because he, instead of just looking at the conclusions, looking at the superficial results, he looked at the causes. And what other men did by chance or custom, he doth by reason. Whatever, because see, Aristotle laid down the rules. If you, I hope you remember what we read about poetics, where Aristotle is seen to be laying down ground rules for comedies and tragedies and what they are supposed to be, how they ought to be written, what should be the nature of the hero in a tragedy, what should be the length of a tragedy. We saw Aristotle laying down rules for writing, right? So Ben Jonson is trying to extol the virtues of Aristotle's findings, that he brought to art something that was never done before. All the beautiful things, all the beautiful things that nature gave to man, all the laborious things, all the hard work that man is capable of, all of that he brought into art. How and why? Because he was capable of understanding the causes of things, and whatever generally men did by chance or practice. Custom here would mean practice. He doth by reason. He doth by reason, as in he was sensible enough to categorically state how a certain thing worked in what proportion, and not only found out the way not to err, but the short way we should take not to err. Yeah, to err here would mean to make mistakes. He not only found out, not lonely here. I'm sorry, not on. It's supposed to be not only. Okay, and not only found out the way not to err, as in he not only found out how not to make a mistake, but the short way we should take to avoid that mistake. All right. Now, referring to, he makes references to Aristotle's unity of action and the dimensions of play and the wholeness, as in like Aristotle insisted upon the wholeness of a certain work, right? How it should be complete, and any action that did not contribute to it. Okay, we'll talk about it later. We'll first go to the unity of action. So, speaking of the unity of action, the fable is called the imitation of one entire and perfect action. Fable here would be the tale, the story, okay? The fable is called the imitation of one entire and perfect action whose parts are so joined and knit together as nothing in the structure can be changed or taken away without impairing or troubling the whole, of which there is a proportionable magnitude in the members. Whole we call that imperfect, which hath a beginning, a midst, and an end. See, the action should be unified in terms of having a beginning, a middle, and an end. A midst here would mean middle. Okay, so he says that is Ben Jonson's referring to Aristotle's idea of unity of action. He says that a fable, that is a tale, should be would be an imitation of one entire and perfect action. One entire and perfect action, as in it should be whole, it should be complete. Complete in the sense it should not start with the birth of the protagonist and then the death of the protagonist. That's not the kind of whole we are talking about. We are talking about the crux of the matter. Okay, crux of the matter, as in what the main point of the play or the story is, and whatever is necessary, only the number of characters that are necessary to bring out the point, only those should be allowed entry into the plot. Only the actions, the sequence of actions should be contributive to the point in question, rather than including incidences or situations that are wholly unnecessary, because they might be detrimental to the unity of action, because they are going to distract you from the main action, right? So Ben Jonson believes that agreeing with Aristotle, he believes that it should have parts that are so joined, that are woven so well together, that are knit together as nothing in the structure can be changed. Okay, you cannot change anything in that play. If you try to tinker with it, if you try to tamper with it, the whole the whole play itself, the whole drama or the narrative itself would be impaired. Okay, and it should be of a proportionable magnitude in the members, as in the characters themselves should be of a proportionable magnitude. They should not be either too low or too high, and we would call it whole, that, and perfect, which hath a beginning, a midst, and an end. Now, considering the dimensions of a play, he says, as in every body, so in every action. Okay, which is the subject of a just work, there is required a certain proportionable greatness, neither too vast nor too minute. For that which happens to the eyes when we behold a body, the same happens to the memory when we contemplate an action. So speaking of the dimensions of play, how large or small, or how magnificent or how lowly it is, it would be just as what is it has to be just as what your our visuals, how we see what we see, you know we can see only to some extent, we can appreciate to that extent. Anything larger than that we cannot fully comprehend through our eyes. He says that our mind works the same way. Anything that is too large, anything that is too great, we can never comprehend the whole together in our imagination. Again, if it be too little, that is, again, if it is too low, there ariseth no pleasure out of our imagination. We cannot find any pleasure in something that is trivial, right? Again, um, again, if it be too little, there ariseth no pleasure out of the object. Okay, neither the object itself would rouse any pleasure in us, because see, Aristotle believed that the purpose of a play itself is to give us pleasure. The purpose of literature is to give us pleasure, right? So it has to have certain magnitude. It affords the view no stay. No stay as in our view cannot be stayed by it. We will only look at things that are pleasurable to us. We won't want to look at anything that is ugly or even mediocre for that matter. Anything that is beautiful, we may give it a glance and come back to look at it again, right? So anything only that has some magnitude to it, that has some pull, some attraction to it, we will go back to look at it again and again. It would provide us some stay. Stay here would have that meaning. For as a body without proportion cannot be goodly, as in everybody has every body here. We're not talking about everybody. Every body, as in everything, every object has to have certain proportion. That cannot be goodly would be anything that is disproportionate is ugly looking, right? So, yeah, I shouldn't use that word. Yes, every so he believed that every action has to be of proportion. No more can the action, either in comedy or tragedy, without his fit bounds. His fit bounds, as in every play has to have its bounds. Two things are to be considered. First, that it exceeds not the compass of one day. Now, this is not Aristotelian, as I spoke earlier while talking about Aristotle, that he did not stress upon unity of time at all. But it was later prescribed by other critics of later centuries, and not merely prescribed, ascribed to Aristotle. Okay, so Ben Jonson too misrepresents Aristotelian view here, saying that the play should not exceed the compass of one day. Anything the drama talks about should comprise of only 24 hours. The action should comprise of only 24 hours, squeezed to an hour's play. Next, that there be place left for digression in art. Digression in art, see, initially he says there should be unity of action, but at the same time, there should be place left for some digression that would contribute to the plot. Okay, here digression does not mean moving away from the plot, but the digression would imply moving towards the plot that contributes to the growth of the plot. At the same time, for some artistic effects. Now, speaking of wholeness, says it should be one and entire. The work itself should be one and entire. One as in either as it is only separate and by itself, or as a being composed of many parts. It begins to be one as those parts grow or are wrought together. So many there be of old that had thought. Sorry, again, a typo error here. Be of old that had thought the action of one man to be one, which is both foolish and false, since by one and the same person many things may be severally done, which cannot fitly be referred or joined to the same end. So an action of diverse materials becomes one structure and one dwelling, so an action composed of diverse parts may become one fable, epic, or dramatic. You see, it should be one and entire, as in most of the time we believe that one individual is single, but what we fail to understand is that he is a part of something bigger, something whole, something, beyond his limit. So the action of one person would be the cause, the result, or the effect of several others. So it should be one, while the play itself speaks of one particular person, it should be including everything together, everyone together. It should be seen as a whole. So you see, the action of one, action of see, since by one and the same person, many things may be severally done. One person could be used to imply so many actions at the same time. The different actions could be applied to different people, or one action could be applied to different people, different characters. So one man, one person, one and the same person, many things may be severally done, which cannot fitly be referred or joined to the same end, as in a person. Like, for instance, it would be better understood when we treat it with an example. Say, for instance, we have a certain protagonist, a Shakespearean protagonist for that matter. That Now consider Orlando of this Shakespearean play, As You Like It. Yeah. So he is the supposed to be the youngest son of a deceased Sir Roland de Boys, and has two brothers, Oliver and Jacques. Okay, Jacques or Jacques, you can call him whichever way you want. Now, we need not concern ourselves with why Oliver hates him so much. We don't need to know about why Adam seems to prefer Orlando so much. Okay, we have been given references to it, and we need not concern ourselves with there are so many aspects surrounding him, but we are not exactly told everything about Orlando. We are only given details, only those only relevant to the play itself, not those that are not relevant. Okay, so a person may have so many things that are that form him, that make his character, that create the character, but they need not all be told here to to um, contribute to the growth of the action. Whereas all the things that are necessary for the growth of the action, you have to bring in here. They need to be referred here, they need to be brought here. So an action of diverse materials becomes one structure in one dwelling. So an action composed of diverse parts may become one fable, epic, or dramatic. So the action of all these diverse parts would contribute to the making of one single epic, or the dramatic fable. Right. This is all for today. Thank you for your patient listening. Stay safe, be happy. Assalamu alaikum.